My father walked into the will reading with his girlfriend, both grinning like they'd just hit the Powerball jackpot. Victoria Sterling, 35, blonde, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, click-clacked her heels across the marble floor of Harrison and Associates like she already owned the place. My father, Richard Chen, strutted beside her in his expensive suit, chest puffed with the confidence of a man who thought he was about to inherit millions. What they didn't know was that Grandma had one final surprise that would change everything. I sat in the corner of the mahogany-paneled conference room, feeling out of place in my police uniform. Just got off shift and didn't have time to go home and change. Grandma had been gone 3 months now, and I still couldn't believe it. "Sarah, sweetie," Victoria's syrupy fake voice cooed when she spotted me. "How wonderful to see you here." The way she said sweetie made my skin crawl, like I was some distant relative who'd crashed a family gathering. Dad barely glanced my way. "I'm surprised you took time off work to be here." "She was my grandmother too," I said quietly. "Of course she was," Dad waved dismissively, already turning to whisper something to Victoria that made her giggle. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat from behind his massive oak desk. At 65, he'd been the Chen family attorney for over 30 years, his silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving him the gravitas of someone who'd witnessed every kind of family drama imaginable. "If everyone's ready," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in family law, "we can begin." Uncle Tom squeezed into the chair beside me, late as always. Dad's younger brother, forever the black sheep of the family, never married, worked as a carpenter, drove a beat-up pickup truck. But he was always good to me. "How you holding up, kiddo?" he whispered. I managed a smile. "I miss her." Victoria stretched in her chair like a cat, already fantasizing about redecorating the mansion she assumed would soon be hers. "Richard, honey, did your mother keep any jewelry? I noticed some lovely pieces in her bedroom." My stomach churned. Grandma had been gone 3 months, and Victoria was already planning to wear her jewelry. Dad squeezed Victoria's hand. "Don't worry, babe. After today, everything's going to change. We'll finally have the life we deserve. The life we deserve." While I spent 5 years changing Grandma's diapers, managing her medications, holding her hand through countless hospital visits, Dad showed up maybe 6 times. Usually when he needed to borrow money from her. Mr. Harrison opened a thick legal folder, his expression unreadable. "Before we begin the formal reading, I must mention that Mrs. Margaret Chen included some unusual provisions in her final will." "Unusual how?" Dad leaned forward, suddenly alert. "She insisted on including personal letters, very specific instructions, and some rather comprehensive conditions." Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers drummed impatiently on the conference table. "Can we just cut to the chase? Who gets what?" Mr. Harrison's mouth tightened into a thin line. After 30 years of knowing our family, he'd never liked Victoria. Mrs. Chen was very particular about the order in which things should be revealed. He pulled out a sealed envelope with red wax, Grandma's personal seal that she'd used on important documents her whole life. "She insisted I read this letter first, before any distribution of assets." Dad rolled his eyes. "Mom always did love her drama." But something in Mr. Harrison's voice made me sit up straighter. There was weight in his words, like he was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of the room. He carefully broke the seal and opened the letter. Grandma's handwriting, shaky but determined in blue ink. "To my family gathered for this reading," Mr. Harrison began. I have lived 78 years, built a business from nothing, and learned that money reveals people's true character. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. Dad's confident smile wavered slightly. In the past 5 years, I have been fortunate to witness true love in action. Not the kind of love that talks, but the kind that shows up, day after day, night after night, through sickness and health, through lucidity and confusion. My throat tightened. She was talking about me, about the years I spent by her side. I have also seen the opposite. I have seen greed disguised as concern. I have seen people who only visited when they needed something. I have seen someone bring a stranger into my home and ask her opinion about which of my belongings she'd like to keep. Victoria's face went pale. Dad's hand dropped from hers. Therefore, my final wishes will reflect what I have observed. Love will be rewarded. Royalty will be honored. And greed, Mr. Harrison paused, looking around the room, will receive exactly what it deserves. The silence in the room was paralyzing. You could hear the air conditioning humming, distant traffic outside, Victoria's sharp intake of breath. Dad's confident posture had completely collapsed. What does that mean? Mr. Harrison carefully folded the letter. It means, Mr. Chen, that your mother's final will may surprise you. Surprise me how? Dad's voice was shaking. Victoria gripped his arm. Richard, you said this was a sure thing. You said your mother was leaving you everything. She did. She had to. Dad was turning red. I'm the only son. Sarah's just... She's just... Just what, Mr. Chen? Mr. Harrison's voice was like steel. Dad stammered, realizing how the next words would sound. She's just a cop. She doesn't know how to handle real money. Uncle Tom snorted. Real money? Sarah's been managing finances, medical bills, and this family for 5 years while you were playing house with Barbie here. Don't you dare, Victoria started. Actually, Mr. Harrison interrupted, I think you'll want to hear what Mrs. Chen had to say specifically about you. Victoria's mouth snapped shut. Mr. Harrison pulled out the official will, thick, legal, bearing official seals. Shall we begin with the actual asset distribution? Dad straightened his tie, trying to regain his confidence. Yes, let's get this over with. But I saw his hands shaking. For the first time since we'd walked into this room, Richard Chen looked scared. And sitting there in my police uniform, clutching my purse in the corner, I had no idea that in the next 10 minutes, my life was about to change forever. Because Grandma's final wishes weren't just about money. They were about justice. And after 30 years of watching our family, she had written it all down. To understand why Grandma's words carried such power, I need to take you back 15 years, to the night that changed our family forever. I was 14, hunched over algebra homework in our living room in Queens when the phone rang. That shrill, persistent sound cutting through our small apartment. Mom was working the night shift. Lieutenant Linda Chen, NYPD, 12 years of service. Dad picked up. Hello? I watched his face drain of color. The pencil in my hand stopped mid-calculation. No, that can't be. His voice cracked. Where's Linda? Which hospital? Mom didn't come home that night, or any night after. My mother died in a shootout with a drug gang in Brooklyn. She and her unit had raided a stash house, but the dealers had automatic weapons. Mom shielded 2 rookie cops, helping them escape to safety. She took 3 bullets to the chest. At the hospital, I held Mom's hand as it grew cold. The smell of disinfectant and medical machinery surrounded us. Dad stood in the corner, red-eyed, unable to speak. "My daughter," Mom whispered, her voice weak but determined. "I want you to know. I don't regret it. We kept 50 pounds of heroin off the streets, saved hundreds of kids." Tears fell onto the white sheets. "Don't say that, Mom. You're going to be okay." "Sarah," Mom squeezed my hand one last time. "Do you want to know why I became a cop?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Because some people can't protect themselves. And someone has to stand up. Someone has to," she coughed, blood on her lips. "Someone has to be the line between evil and innocent people." Those were the last words she said to me. In the car home from the hospital, Dad didn't say a word. But I saw how he gripped the steering wheel, jaw hard as stone. At the funeral, the entire precinct came. Hundreds of blue uniforms standing in the rain. Taps played as they lowered the American flag from Mom's coffin. That's when I made the decision that changed my life. I want to become a cop like Mom. I was 16, sitting across from Dad in our kitchen. 2 years had passed since Mom died, and Dad had changed completely. No more laughing, no more hugging me, no more talking about the future. "Absolutely not," Dad said, voice cold as ice. "I lost my wife to that damn job. I won't lose my daughter, too." "But Dad, Mom saved—" "Your mother is dead," Dad roared, slamming his hand on the table. "She died because of this stupid job, because she wanted to play hero." I recoiled, shocked by the rage in his voice. "Girls shouldn't be cops," Dad continued, voice shaking with emotion. "It's a man's job. Dangerous, violent. You'll study business, marry a good man, live a safe life." "But Dad, I want to help people, like Mom did." "Your mother died for that," he screamed. "Do you understand?" "She's dead because she wanted to help people?" That night, I cried in my room, clutching Mom's photo in uniform. In the picture, Mom smiled confidently, wearing her badge and gun, standing beside her patrol car. I knew I would become her. When I turned 18, Dad refused to pay for police academy. "If you go down that path," he said, not looking at me, "you go alone. Don't expect my support." I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay tuition. Waitressing at night, working the corner store on weekends, and cleaning offices at dawn. On Police Academy graduation day, I sat in the auditorium searching for familiar faces. 200 families applauding their children. But Dad's seat stayed empty. Only one person showed up. Grandma. Margaret Chen, 68 years old, sat front row with her small purse and brilliant smile. When I received my diploma and badge, she stood and clapped louder than anyone. "I'm proud of you," she said after the ceremony, hugging me tight. Linda would be proud of her daughter. "What about Dad?" I asked. She shook her head sadly. "Richard is still hurting. He doesn't understand that avoiding pain isn't how you heal it." My first year as a cop, I barely spoke to Dad. He changed his phone number, moved to a different apartment, like he wanted to erase every trace of our old life. Then he met Victoria. She was young, beautiful, and everything Mom wasn't. Where Mom was strong and independent, Victoria was weak and dependent. Where Mom wore a uniform, Victoria wore expensive dresses. Where Mom saved other people's lives, Victoria only cared about herself. The first time I met Victoria, she looked at my police uniform with disgust. "Why would a pretty girl like Sarah choose such a masculine job?" she said to Dad, as if I wasn't there. It's teenage rebellion, Dad replied. She'll grow up and quit this dangerous nonsense. But I didn't quit. I advanced. Over the next 10 years, I went from patrol officer to detective, solved difficult cases, saved lives, arrested criminals, and through it all, only one person followed my career: Grandma. She kept every newspaper article about cases I solved. Every time I won an award or got promoted, she was the first to call and congratulate me. "You're doing the right thing," she always said. Linda would be proud. When Grandma started showing signs of Alzheimer's 5 years ago, I didn't hesitate. I switched to different shifts so I could care for her evenings and weekends. Dad rarely visited. Victoria never did. "Why waste time with that old woman?" Victoria said to me once, when she and Dad came to get money from Grandma. "You should focus on finding a husband, not playing with guns." But Grandma wasn't that old woman. She was the only person who loved me for who I really was. The only person proud of me wearing the uniform. The only person who understood why I chose this path. And in her final lucid moments, she often said, "Sarah, you're the best thing this family has left. You have Linda's heart, but your own strength." 3 months before she died, Grandma called Mr. Harrison to the house. I was in the kitchen preparing her medication when I heard their conversation. "I want to change my will," she said, voice clear and firm. "Sarah has proven she's the only worthy one." "Mrs. Chen," Mr. Harrison said carefully, "this is a big decision. Richard is your son." "Richard chose money over family," she interrupted. "He chose a woman who only cares about my property." "But Sarah chose me. Every day for 5 years. I stood there, hands shaking as I held her medicine cup, hearing her continue. "She's a cop, like her mother. She risks her life to protect others, while my son risks, what? Just his ego and wallet?" And sitting in that will reading today, hearing Grandma's final words read aloud, I finally understood that she had decided to leave everything to the only person who continued the family's true legacy. Not money, but service. The 5 years I cared for Grandma were the hardest of my life, but they were also the years I learned what family really means. It started when she was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. I remember that day like a knife. A March afternoon, I just finished my shift and got the call from the doctor. "Detective Chen," he said carefully, "we have your grandmother's test results. Can you come to the hospital?" I drove through Manhattan in the rain, heart hammering. Grandma sat in the examination room looking small in her flowered blouse, hands gripping her purse. "Alzheimer's," the doctor explained. "Early stage, but it will progress. She'll need full-time care within 1 to 2 years. Grandma looked at me, eyes still bright and alert. "Sarah, don't worry, I'll be fine." But I knew she wouldn't be fine, and I couldn't let her face this alone. That night, I called Dad. "She has Alzheimer's," I said bluntly. "She needs care." Long silence on the other end. Finally, "Find a good nursing home. I'll pay for it." "You don't understand. She needs family, love." "Sarah, I'm busy. I can't." "Can't what? Spend time with your own mother?" "Don't make this dramatic. Just find professional care." I hung up, fists clenched. Victoria was in the background. I could hear her voice. "Richard, honey, I think we should go to the Bahamas this weekend." That's when I made my decision. I moved in with Grandma in her small house in Queens. the house where Dad grew up, where she'd raised her family for 40 years. I switched to the morning shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., so I could be home to care for her in the evenings. The first days weren't too bad. She still remembered most things, just occasionally forgot to turn off the stove or misplaced her keys. We watched old movies together, and she told stories about her youth, about meeting Grandpa. "You know," she said one evening as we looked through photo albums, "I always wanted a daughter." Richard was a wonderful son, but boys are different than girls. Boys fly away when they grow up. Girls stay to care for the family. I looked at the old photos. Grandma in a business suit from the 1980s, standing in front of her first real estate office. She'd been a powerful woman once, built an empire from nothing. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Having to care for this old woman?" "Don't say that," I said, taking her hand. "I'm here because I want to be here." But as the disease progressed, everything became harder. Grandma started forgetting my name. Sometimes she called me Linda, my mother's name. Other nights, she didn't recognize me at all and was terrified to see a stranger in her house. I learned to change her diapers, bathe her, feed her when she forgot how to hold a spoon. During the nights she woke up screaming, thinking she was somewhere else, I held her and sang old songs until she fell back asleep. The medication costs kept climbing. I used my entire savings to buy drugs insurance wouldn't cover. Weekends, I worked overtime shifts to make ends meet. Dad visited maybe 6 times in those 5 years. Each time Victoria came along, sitting in the living room checking her watch and complaining about the smell of medicine. "Why is Sarah wasting her time with that old woman?" Victoria said to Dad, thinking I couldn't hear. "She's 28 and still not married. Instead of chasing criminals and babysitting the elderly, she should focus on finding a husband." "That's just her personality," Dad replied. "Always stubborn." "But don't you see the waste? A pretty girl like that choosing dangerous work, then becoming an unpaid nurse for an old lady?" I stood in the hallway, gripping a washcloth, forcing myself not to storm out and scream. Meanwhile, my police career was advancing. I was promoted from patrol officer to detective after solving a 3-month bank robbery case, then to special crimes unit after I caught a child trafficker. Every time I won an award or got promoted, I called Dad. "Dad, I just got promoted to detective sergeant." "Oh, good. Do you need money?" "I just solved the biggest drug case, made the papers." "Sarah, I'm busy. Let's talk later." Click. But Grandma was different. She kept every newspaper article about me. Every time I told her about work, her eyes lit up, even when she couldn't remember my name. "You're like Linda," she said in one lucid moment. "You have the heart of a warrior." Last year, I solved the biggest drug case in the city's history, a heroin pipeline from Mexico to New York. We seized 110 pounds of heroin and arrested 15 suspects, including the kingpin. It was the same type of heroin that killed my mother 15 years ago. I stood in that warehouse, looking at the sealed bags of heroin, and felt like Mom was standing beside me. "We did it, Mom," I whispered. Chief Williams called me into his office the next week. "Chen," he said with a rare smile, "you're about to be promoted to captain." At 29, that's a record. Captain. The same rank Mom never got the chance to reach. I went home and told Grandma. That day she was having a good day, remembered my name and recognized me. "You're going to be captain," I said. Grandma took my hand, eyes full of tears. Linda would be so proud. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "Sarah, I want you to know something. I changed my will. Don't think about those things. No, you have to listen. Richard doesn't deserve it. He abandoned me, abandoned you. But you showed me the real meaning of family." 3 months later, Grandma died in her sleep. I was sleeping in the chair beside her bed when I heard her breathing change. "Grandma," I whispered, taking her hand. "I love you." She opened her eyes one last time, looked at me, and smiled. "Sarah, you are my pride." Those were her last words. At the funeral, Dad and Victoria sat in the front row, both wearing expensive black clothes. I sat beside them in my police uniform. Grandma had once said she wanted to see me wear my uniform at her funeral. "So everyone knows who you are," she'd said. After the funeral, Dad approached me. "We need to talk about Mom's house and assets," he said. "There's a will," I replied. "She arranged everything." Dad smiled confidently. "Of course. Mom was always organized. Good thing you took such good care of her. I'll make sure you're compensated fairly when we sell the house." Victoria squeezed his arm. "Richard, I think we should keep the big house, renovate it into a mansion." I watched them planning Grandma's property and felt that familiar anger rising. But I only said, "We'll see," because what they didn't know was that during those 5 years, while I was changing diapers and giving medications, Grandma had been watching everything. She saw who really cared, and she had a plan. Mr. Harrison carefully folded Grandma's letter and opened the official will. Thick pages, stamped with legal seals, every word carrying the weight of law. "Now we'll proceed to the distribution of assets," he said, voice grave. Dad sat up straight, Victoria gripping his arm, both wearing confident smiles. I sat silently in my police uniform, feeling like an outsider in my own family. I, Margaret Elizabeth Chen, being of sound mind and body, leave my final will as follows. Mr. Harrison paused, looking around the room. "First, to my son Richard Chen, I leave the sum of $100,000. Deathly silence. Dad blinked like someone had just slapped him. "What?" $100,000, Mr. Harrison repeated. That's all?" Victoria stammered, face draining of color. "That's impossible." Dad shot to his feet, chair scraping loudly. "Mom had $50 million in assets. The house, the company, investments. Where did it all go?" Mr. Harrison remained calm. "Please, let me finish." "No!" Victoria screamed, voice like nails on glass. "This can't be legal. That old woman was mentally disturbed. Alzheimer's made her incapable of sound decisions." "Miss Sterling," Mr. Harrison said coldly, "Mrs. Chen made this will during the early stages of her illness, when her mind was completely lucid. I have extensive medical documentation proving this." Dad whipped toward me, eyes blazing. "What did you do? How did you manipulate her?" "I didn't do anything," I said, still stunned. "Don't lie to me," Dad roared. 5 years you were by her side, manipulating a sick old woman. You brainwashed her against her own son." Uncle Tom stood up. "Richard, stop it. You have no right." "What about my part?" Victoria interrupted, voice shaking with desperation. "Where's my portion?" Richard and I are getting married. Mr. Harrison looked at her with contempt. Mrs. Chen did mention you specifically. He turned to another page. Regarding Victoria Sterling's presumption that she is family, I leave her exactly what she deserves. Nothing. Victoria's mouth fell open. No, that can't be. Victoria Sterling shall receive no assets, money, or property from my estate. She has made it clear that she only cares about my money, not my family. Victoria collapsed into her chair, face white as paper. Dad still stood there, trembling. So where's the rest? Where did the other $49.9 million go? Mr. Harrison looked directly at me. I leave the remainder of my estate, including the house, the company, all bank accounts and investments, to my granddaughter, Sarah Elizabeth Chen. The world stopped spinning. I heard my heartbeat, heard Victoria gasping, heard Dad's chair grinding against the wooden floor. That's impossible, I whispered. Mr. Harrison smiled for the first time all afternoon. $49.9 million, Officer Chen. You've just become one of the wealthiest women in New York City. No! Victoria shrieked like a banshee. This can't be legal. I'll sue. I'll contest it. You have no standing to contest anything, Mr. Harrison said calmly. You're not family. Dad turned to me, face twisted with rage. I'll sue you. I'll prove you manipulated a sick old woman. Mr. Chen, Mr. Harrison interrupted. Your son can try to contest this, but I must inform you that your mother anticipated this. He pulled out a thick file folder. Here are 200 pages documenting Mrs. Chen's complete mental competency when she made this will, including evaluations from 3 independent doctors, video recordings of her answering complex questions, and full audio recordings of her explaining her reasoning for these decisions. Dad stepped back like he'd been shoved. And if you want to know her reasoning, Mr. Harrison continued, I can read her explanation. Don't, Dad said, voice like wind. I think I should. Mr. Harrison opened another page. My son Richard visited me 6 times during my 5 years of illness. Each time was to ask for money. He never asked about my health, never sat to talk, never remembered my birthday. Victoria stumbled toward the door. The woman he brought to my home asked me about converting the living room into a personal gym. She asked about selling my antique paintings to buy modern jewelry. She called my home outdated and needing total renovation. Victoria stopped at the door, not daring to turn around. Meanwhile, Sarah gave up her personal life to care for me. She changed her work schedule, spent her savings on my medications, and never complained once. When I forgot her name, she patiently reminded me. When I was afraid in the night, she sang to me until morning. Tears fell onto my uniform. Furthermore, I followed Sarah's police career. She was just promoted to captain at 29, a city record. She solved the biggest drug case in our history, the same type of drugs that killed her mother 15 years ago. I looked up, shocked. You knew about the captain promotion? Mr. Harrison smiled. She knew everything, Officer Chen. She had contacts at the police department. She knew about your achievements before you even told her. But how? She was a successful businesswoman, dear. She had a wide network, and she was very proud of her granddaughter. Dad collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. $50 million. Mom left $50 million to the child who deserved it, Uncle Tom said. To the one who showed real love. Victoria turned around, face streaked with tears and smeared makeup. Richard, we have to do something. We can sue. We can... There is no we, Dad said, not looking at her. There's nothing left. Victoria stood there for a moment, then screamed, You think I'm staying with a man who only has $100,000? I can make more than that in one night modeling. She spun around and stormed out of the room, heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. The door slammed shut, and for the first time in 15 years, Richard Chen sat alone. Mr. Harrison handed me a stack of papers. You need to sign these documents, Captain Chen. Captain Chen. The first time anyone had called me by my new rank. I looked at Dad, still sitting there with his head in his hands, and felt empty. Not victorious, not joyful, just sad for the man who had once been my hero. But Grandma wasn't finished yet, because as I read through the rest of the will, I would discover that the $50 million came with special conditions, and those conditions would change not just my life, but the very meaning of justice itself. I held the stack of papers with trembling hands, eyes still unable to believe the numbers. $49.9 million. More money than I could imagine in a lifetime. But Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. However, he said, turning to the next page, Mrs. Chen established some very specific conditions for the use of these assets. Dad looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. What conditions? The conditions only apply to Sarah, Mr. Harrison said coldly. You've received your portion, Mr. Chen. He turned to me. Miss Chen, your grandmother has 3 mandatory requirements. I nodded, still dazed. First, you must use at least $20 million to establish a fund supporting police families and victims of drug crimes. My heart stopped. She knew. She understood completely why I chose this profession. Second, you cannot give Richard Chen a single penny beyond the $100,000 he has received, under any circumstances. Dad shot to his feet. What? Mom can't prevent Sarah from helping family. Well, she can, and she did, Mr. Harrison replied. It's a binding condition. If Sarah violates this, the entire estate transfers to charity. And the third? I asked, voice hoarse. Mr. Harrison smiled. Victoria Sterling shall never benefit from these assets in any form. If she marries Richard, he forfeits even the $100,000. Silence. Complete silence. Then Dad exploded. Vicious! He roared, slamming his fist on the table. Mom became vicious! She let this girl brainwash her! Richard, Uncle Tom stood up. Be quiet. No! Dad whipped toward me, face red with rage. What did you do to my mother? 5 years you were by her side. What did you say to make her hate her own son? I never spoke badly about you to her, I said, standing up. Not once. You're lying. Otherwise, why would my mother write things like this? Because she saw it with her own eyes, I said, voice calm but steel. She saw you only come when you needed money. She saw Victoria wanting to turn her home into a gym. She saw who really cared about her. You manipulated a sick old woman. I changed her diapers, I exploded. I fed her when she forgot how to swallow. I stayed awake all night when she was scared. Where were you? What were you doing? I was building a new life. With her money. Every time you came, you only asked for money. Dad stepped toward me, face twisted with rage. I'm her son. I had rights. What rights? I didn't back down. The right to abandon her when she needed you most? The right to bring a woman who called her that old woman? The right to only care when there was money involved? Shut up, Dad screamed. That's when I truly lost my temper. 5 years of pent-up anger erupted. No! I won't shut up. My mother died protecting others, and you hated police work. Grandma got sick, and you abandoned her. I tried for 15 years to get your approval, and you only saw me as a disappointment. Dad stepped back, shocked by my outburst. And now, I continued, voice shaking with emotion, when she's passed away and left what she built her whole life to the person who truly loved her, you accuse me of manipulation? Manipulation how? By loving her? Sarah, Mr. Harrison said softly. I turned to him, tears on my face. Could you please continue reading? He nodded and opened the final page. Mrs. Chen left a personal letter for Sarah. He handed me a small envelope with my name written in Grandma's familiar handwriting. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm gone, and the greedy ones have shown their true nature. I'm not surprised. I want you to know that every night you woke up to care for me, every time you patiently wiped my tears, every time you sang old songs until I fell asleep, I remember. Even when I didn't recognize your face, my heart always knew who you were. You were the only one who never asked me about money. You only asked, what do you need? Are you in pain? Would you like to hear music? This $50 million isn't a reward. It's a tool. I want you to use it to continue what you've done your whole life. Protect and care for others. And about Richard, I hope someday he'll understand that family isn't about blood or money. Family is about being there for each other, about unconditional love, about sacrificing for others. You've shown all of that. I love you, Sarah. Your mother would be proud. Grandma. I folded the letter, tears falling onto my uniform. Dad stood there, looking at me with completely different eyes. For the first time, I saw something in his gaze that looked like regret. Sarah, he said, voice small. But before he could continue, the door burst open. A large man in police uniform stepped in. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but I'm looking for Captain Sarah Chen. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. That's me, I said, wiping my tears. Captain, he saluted. I'm Lieutenant Morrison. Chief Williams sent me to inform you that the city has officially announced your promotion. The press is waiting outside to interview you about the largest drug bust in history. He looked around the room, realizing this wasn't a good time. Oh, and the chief said the mayor wants to present you with Officer of the Year next week. Complete silence. Dad looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Not the girl playing with guns. Not the family disappointment. But Captain Sarah Chen, Officer of the Year. The woman who had saved hundreds of lives and just inherited $50 million for love and sacrifice. Captain, Lieutenant Morrison said, would you like me to tell the press you'll be out shortly? I looked at Dad one last time. The man who had refused to acknowledge my worth for 15 years. The man who had just lost everything due to greed and neglect. Yes, I said, I'm ready. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's approval. I was Captain Sarah Chen. I had $50 million to help others, and I had a new mission: to turn pain into purpose, loss into legacy. 6 months after the will reading, I stood before a 20-story building in Manhattan with a large bronze plaque. The Linda and Margaret Chen Foundation, supporting police families and drug crime victims. $25 million. That's how much I'd invested in the foundation, more than even Grandma's conditions required. Because I understood this wasn't about money. This was about legacy. Captain Chen? Jessica Martinez, the foundation's new executive director, stepped beside me. The press conference is about to begin. I nodded, looking up at the building one last time. Mom would be proud. Grandma, too. The press room was packed with reporters. New York's mayor sat beside me, along with Chief Williams and representatives from 5 families the foundation had already helped. In the past 6 months, I said into the microphone, the Linda and Margaret Chen Foundation has supported 127 police families. We've paid college tuition for 45 children who lost parents in the line of duty. We've provided free counseling for 200 drug crime victims. Camera flashes flickered. I looked out at the audience and saw a familiar face in the back row. Dad. Richard Chen sat there alone, wearing an old suit, no Victoria beside him. Most importantly, I continued, we've established training programs to help kids in underserved communities stay away from drugs, because prevention is always better than treatment. A reporter raised her hand. Captain Chen, there are rumors you've turned down multiple private sector offers worth millions. Why do you choose to stay in police work? I smiled. Because some things matter more than money. My mother taught me that there are people who can't protect themselves, and someone has to stand up. I choose to be that someone. After the press conference, Dad waited for me outside. Sarah, he said as I emerged, could I talk with you for a moment? We walked to a small coffee shop nearby. He looked much older than 6 months ago. More gray hair, shoulders slumped, tired eyes. I want to apologize, he said as we sat down. You already did. No, I mean truly apologize. Not for losing the money, but for losing my daughter. I looked at him, seeing tears in the eyes of the man who had once been my hero. 15 years, he continued. I was so consumed with grief over losing Linda that I couldn't see you were becoming exactly like your mother. Strong, dedicated, brave. Dad, let me finish. Victoria left me that very night. She said I was a loser and she wouldn't waste time with a poor man. I realized I'd loved a woman who only cared about Mom's money. He took a sip of coffee, hands trembling. My company is struggling too. Without the investment from Mom like I'd planned, I borrowed too much. I might go bankrupt in the next 6 months. Do you want me to help? I asked. He shook his head. No. I know I can't take another penny from you. That was Mom's condition. And I understand why. He looked directly into my eyes. I want to ask permission to be your father again. Not for money, not for benefit, just because I love you and I'm proud of you. Tears fell down my cheeks. Did you know about my captain promotion? I know now. I've read every article about you in the past 6 months. The drug bust, the mayor's award, the foundation. I've missed so much. Why didn't you come sooner? Because I was ashamed. And because I was afraid you wouldn't forgive me. I reached out, taking his hand. The once strong hands were now small and weak in mine. I forgave you long ago, I said. I was just waiting for you to be ready to be a real father. A year later, I stood at the cemetery beside Mom's and Grandma's graves. Dad stood beside me, both of us in formal attire, me in my captain's uniform, him in a simple black suit. Linda, he said to Mom's headstone, our daughter has become the amazing woman you always knew she would be. Then he turned to Grandma's grave. Mom, thank you for teaching me the final lesson about family. I placed flowers on both graves, white roses for Mom, yellow chrysanthemums for Grandma. The foundation just opened its 5th center, I told them. We've helped over 500 families now, and Dad's gone back to work. Not as a CEO anymore, but as a financial advisor for police families. Dad smiled. That $100,000 helped me start over. Not much, but enough to learn how to live humbly. As we left the cemetery, my phone rang. A call from Chief Williams. Captain Chen, he said, I have good news. The city just approved your proposal for the special anti-drug unit. You'll be promoted to Major and lead the new division. Major, the highest rank a woman had ever achieved in NYPD history. And there's more, the chief continued. The FBI wants you to join a national task force. They say you're the country's leading expert on drug crime. I looked at Dad, who was beaming with pride. I'll accept, I said into the phone. But I want to keep the foundation. That's my top priority. Of course. No one expects anything less from you, Major Chen. Major Chen. Had a nice ring to it. When I hung up, Dad hugged me tight. Your mother and grandmother are so proud, he whispered. I know, I replied. I can feel them here. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt complete. I had my family back. I had clear purpose. And I had the resources to make real change. Sometimes the greatest losses lead to the greatest discoveries about yourself. Sometimes family has to break apart before it can be rebuilt the right way. And sometimes, when you stop seeking approval from others, you realize you already had everything you needed inside yourself. If you've ever been dismissed by family for choosing your own path, remember this. Your true worth doesn't come from what others think of you. It comes from what you do with your life to help others. Share your story in the comments if you've ever had to choose between family approval and doing what's right. Where did you find your real family? And if this story touched your heart, subscribe to hear more stories about courage, sacrifice, and the power of living according to your own values.